The Appraisal Foundation the Appraiser Qualifications Board, AQB, establishes the minimum education, experience, and examination requirements for state licensed and certified real property appraisers. Each credential also possesses a specified scope of practice, which identifies the type of real property that can be appraised by the credential holders. Recent actions within the lending industry have changed the levels at which an appraisal must be performed by a state licensed or certified appraiser. As a result, the AQB has reviewed the potential impact of those actions and is proposing a revision to the scope of practice for the licensed residential real property appraiser classification in this brief exposure draft document. God damn it. Page 2. All interested parties are encouraged to comment in writing to the AQB before February 7th, 2020. The AQB will also accept verbal comments at its public meeting in San Diego, California on Friday, February 7th, 2020. You may register to either attend the meeting in person or watch it via live stream by visiting that link right there. Respondents should be assured that each member of the AQB will thoroughly read and consider all comments. Written comments on this proposed change can be submitted by mail or email. And it shows the address in Washington for the Appraisal Qualifications Board. Or you can email them at that email. Important note, all written comments will be posted for public viewing on the Appraisal Foundation's website exactly as submitted to the AQB. Names may be redacted upon request. The Appraisal Foundation reserves the right not to post written comments that contain offensive and inappropriate statements. Page 3. First exposure draft of a proposed change to the real property appraiser qualification criteria. Licensed residential scope of practice issued January 6, 2020. Comment deadline February 7th, 2020. This exposure draft begins with rationale for the proposed changes to the real property appraiser qualification criteria. The rationale is identified as such that does not have a line numbering. Where proposed changes to the criteria are noted, the exposure draft contains line numbers. This difference is intended to distinguish those parts that explain the changes to the criteria from the proposed changes themselves. When commenting on various aspects of the exposure draft, it is very helpful to reference the line numbers, fully explain the reasons for concern or support, provide examples or illustrations, and suggest any alternatives or additional issues that the AQB should consider. Unless otherwise noted, where text is proposed to be deleted from the criteria, that text is shown as strike through. For example, this is a strike through text proposed for deletion. That text that is proposed to be added to the criteria is underlined. For example, this is text proposed for insertion. A la verga. Page 4. Proposed change regarding licensed residential scope of practice. Rationale. Under federal law, appraisals in specified lending transactions for federally regulated financial institutions must comply with the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP, and be performed by a state licensed or certified appraiser. However, the federal financial regulatory agencies have created several exemptions from this requirement, including the establishment of a threshold, also known as de minimis amount, by which lending institutions may utilize evaluations that do not require compliance with USPAP and can be performed by individuals who are not state licensed or certified appraisers. For many years, the threshold level established by the banking agencies was a transaction value of $250,000. However, those agencies recently increased that amount to $400,000. The scope of practice for the licensed residential real property appraiser currently applies to the appraisal of non-complex 1 to 4 residential unit properties with a transaction value less than $1 million and complex 1 to 4 residential unit properties with a transaction value less than $250,000. Since the action by the banking agencies no longer requires appraisals performed by a state licensed or certified appraiser for transaction values below $400,000, the AQB believes it is not reasonable to restrict the ability of licensed residential appraisers to perform appraisals of complex 1 to 4 unit residential unit properties beyond $400,000 threshold amount established by the regulatory agencies. As a result, the AQB is proposing increasing that amount from $250,000 to $400,000. The AQB is proposing the corresponding retirement of Guide Note 3, GN-3, because the content of the guidance has become dated and is no longer meaningful due to the proposed change described above. Page 5. Real property appraiser classifications. Licensed residential real property appraiser. Roman numeral 1. General. A. The licensed residential real property appraiser classification applies to the appraisal of non-complex 1 to 4 unit residential units having a transaction value less than $1 million and complex 1 to 4 unit residential units having a transaction value less than $400,000. Guide notes. Everything through here has a line through it now. So I guess they did away with the old real property appraiser qualification criteria for licensed residential and certified residential classifications. This is the following paragraph appeared in the scope of practice section. The scope of practice identified herein represents the consensus of the Appraiser Qualifications Board, the federal financial institutions regulatory agencies, as well as other agencies and regulatory bodies permit the certified residential or licensed classification to appraise properties other than those identified within the criteria. Individuals should refer to agency regulations and state laws to determine the type of property that may be appraised by the certified residential or licensed appraiser. During the criteria exposure draft, any revision process, the AQB determined that this paragraph was more explanatory guidance than actual AQB criteria. As a result, it was removed from the criteria effective January 1st, 2008. However, while it is not contained in the post-2008 criteria, it should be noted that the paragraph, I don't know what that word is, italicized above still reflects the consensus of the AQB. The scope of practice for the licensed residential and certified residential classifications did not change in 2008. Federal and state agencies continue to establish scope of practice thresholds that are specific to their particular needs. For example, because federally related transactions less than $250,000 fall below the regulatory de minimis established by the federal financial institution regulatory agencies, the scope of practice restrictions placed on individuals who can appraise commercial and residential properties below that threshold for financial institutions are few, if any. The AQB continues to encourage individuals to refer to agency regulations and state law to determine the type of property that may be appraised by the licensed residential and certified residential classifications. So that whole thing was done with.